Morning, everybody. Thank you and welcome to all our existing customers and a few familiar faces. And thank you for our emerging customers that are joining us for the first time today on our Gallagher eShepherd webinar. This is the third webinar we've run over the last few months and really aiming at getting those consistently every month for helping out customers, sharing information, a bit of training along the way. My name's Mark Dempsey, eShepherd Business Development Manager here in Australia. My role is largely helping beef producers walk through their eShepherd journey. I will let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be made public in the future, so just keep that in mind. And I would like to introduce now a few of our team members that are co-hosting today. So first of all, Andrew Zipson, give us a wave, Zippo.
Hello, everyone.
Zippo is our Global Customer Success Manager, and he'll be running through the training today and walking us around the platform. Also, Catherine Morgan, gives a wave, Catherine.
Hi, everyone.
Catherine's our Software Engineering Manager based in Australia also, and Catherine will be helping out today, answering some questions in the chat as we go along. And also thank you to all the other eShepherd team members joining in today. So today's theme is all about rotational grazing, which is a common topic as the eShepherd sales team talking to new customers. Rotational grazing seems to be very topical, so we wanted to run through, I guess, some of the fundamentals about how rotational grazing can be implemented using the eShepherd system, and Zippo will be giving us a really solid demonstration on that within the platform shortly. And then once we've run through the platform, we'll be doing some or having some question and answer time at the end and answering any questions that we haven't been able to get to during our session. If you do have to leave early, it's no dramas at all. We will have a link with a recording to this webinar, and all the question and answers will be posted with that link. So yeah, no stress if you've got to duck off early, that'll be fine. Everyone's got their microphones off, I see, so that's great. It just helps with cutting down the background noise. And lastly, I do encourage you all to make any comments, or if you've got questions, sharing your experiences, you can just pop them in the chat as we go along, and we'll aim to get through as many of those today. Also, yeah, feel free to ask questions. If you don't mind just putting your hand up, there is a little icon there to raise your hand, and we'll do our best to answer those as we go along. Alrighty, let's get stuck in. Zippo, over to you, mate.
Okay, good morning and good afternoon and good evening for some of you across the globe. Really good to have you guys with us. So I'm going to jump straight into it. So I'm sharing my screen again. I hope you can all see that nice and large this time. And thanks for the suggestion previously where you said, oh, can you make your cursor a little bit bigger? So I hope you can see my nice big finger there and my nice big cursor. Okay, so rotational grazing is pretty much the name of the game for everyone that's using the platform. We create a whole bunch of virtual paddocks to move our animals around in the paddock and really improve the efficiency of our grazing. So I'm going to run through a few concepts on how to set this up, and then how to use the scheduling feature to be able to automate some of the virtual fence activations, so you don't have to do that manually every day, or even shorter periods depending on what your grazing plan looks like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just delve down into one of these areas here where I've got one mob that's in a paddock. And remember this demo property here, these icons are generated by a computer script, so they're not quite representative, but it allows us to demonstrate some of these principles. And what I've got here in this physical paddock, right, the white lines outline the physical paddocks, the solid orange lines indicate an active virtual fence. And then some of these dotted orange lines are virtual paddocks that are not active yet, right? So if we have a look at this scenario here, we've got a single watering point at the bottom of this paddock here, marked out down there. And with the limited water available in the paddock, then we need to allow animals to come back to this location, right? So what we're doing in this case is we're going from one virtual paddock, and then we are extending the grazing area so that they always have allocation or access to some fresh pastures. So you can see this sequence here, we're just moving the leading edge of the virtual fence line further and further forward until we've reached the end of the paddock. So that's the situation that we've got here, and this always allows animals to come back to the watering point. Now, if I go over here, I've got a different scenario set up here, and it's a very similar, but there are some differences. I'm going to try and introduce a little bit of back grazing into this virtual paddock here. So again, we start off with the animals. They may have come down through a laneway into this paddock. You can already have a virtual paddock pre-prepared where animals will be contained by these virtual fence boundaries as soon as they enter this physical paddock. And just to show all of that, right, there is a larger physical paddock here, and we're going to break this down into smaller chunks. In this example, we've got some watering points around here, around the start of the paddock, and then there's a dam more centrally located in the paddock here. And we're going to maneuver the animals and allow them to graze out towards this watering point here. And then once we've reached that watering point, we'll start to do some back fencing, right? So that we prevent them from going back to these water sources here. So again, I'm just going to show the sequence of virtual paddocks that we've got here. So you can see we're just extending that leading edge and allowing them to access more pasture, whilst they still can return to this watering point. And let me undo that. It's jumped forward a little bit too far. So we've gone to, and you can see I've got the sequence of paddocks set up here, right? So I've named them after the physical paddock that these virtual paddocks are in. So and I've named them Crown 01, 2. I'll explain what this one's about in a moment. This is 02-1. But now we're at 04, and then I'll turn on 05. So you can see we continue to creep forward and just extend that grazing area. And then now once we've actually reached this other watering point, now I'm starting to pull the back fence in on these animals, right? So now they will no longer have access to the watering point over here, and they're really forced to come to this watering point. And then, right, as that sequence continues, we can continue pulling back the back fence behind them to really encourage them to come only to this watering point here and rotate around the physical paddock. In a situation like this, it may be the case that some animals are left behind. A few of them are left behind in the exclusion zone once the new virtual paddock has been turned on. Generally, that's not a problem. When you do have, let's say, a few animals that are left in the exclusion zone when a new paddock has been turned on, nothing will happen for them, right? They're okay to be there, and their virtual fence will only become active once they've moved into the new virtual paddock that is now turned on, right? So they're okay to move in here. They typically will rejoin with the rest of the mob and come to the new water source. As soon as they're in that new virtual paddock, then they're just prevented from coming out of it. So you're quite safe to handle it in that way. Now, one thing that has come up a number of times, and I want to take a moment to explain, is the transition between virtual paddocks. So we have one virtual paddock that is active, and we're going to the next virtual paddock. And this has caused a little bit of confusion for some people. So I'm going to describe the process of what happens there in a little bit more detail. Let's move in on this one virtual paddock that we've got active already, and our animals are in this virtual paddock. And the next virtual paddock in the sequence, sorry, that's not working out for me, is here. So really, we want to extend their grazing area and go to this next part of the paddock. But what I've done, I've deliberately made quite a separate virtual paddock here, so we can really see what's going on, right? Because if I just explain that a little bit more, this virtual paddock here, to make Crown 02 virtual paddock, I've taken a copy of the first one, and I will run through this in a moment, so don't worry if you're not sure what that's about. But 0-2, I've just extended out the virtual fence boundaries on the leading edge, and the rest of the boundaries go all the way around the previous one, right? So with that in mind, I've now created one that is slightly larger so that we can see what happens during the transition. Here we go. So I'm going to now activate this virtual paddock for this mob. So to do that, I'm going over to the mob menu. These are our Angus cows. So I'm going to select the Angus cows and I'm going to turn on the next virtual paddock in this sequence. So I'm going to go turn on now. I'm going to choose the virtual paddock, and now instead of going to Crown 02, right, I'm going to turn on Crown 02-1 just so we can really see what's going to go and what's happening here. I select that virtual paddock. It's highlighted on the screen for me, so I have a high degree of confidence that I've selected the right one, and I'm now going to turn it on. Okay, so now you can see 2 active virtual paddocks, right? And this is very normal because what happens now is the system at the back end from our platform here will start sending messages to our neckbands out in the paddock. So first there's communication down to the neckband to say, hey, here is a new virtual paddock, right? So it's showing that, yep, this new virtual paddock here is now in the process of being activated. And what needs to happen is we need to hear back a message from each one of the neckbands to tell us, hey, I've received the new virtual paddock and I'm now enforcing the new one. I'm no longer enforcing the old one. So during that transition process, 2 active virtual paddocks will be shown on the system until finally all of the neckbands have responded back to say, yes, I'm on the new virtual fence, right? So please don't make the mistake of thinking, oh, gosh, the old virtual paddock is still active. I need to go and turn it off, right? Because if you now go and do that and say, oh, I'm quick for my Angus cows, I need to turn off the previous virtual paddock, what you're actually doing is you're overriding the instructions for the new virtual paddock, and you will essentially deactivate all of your neckbands, right? So don't do that. Just be patient. It will take maybe half an hour, or depending on your communication reliability, it might take even a little bit longer for the virtual fence to update on all of your neckbands, right? So just be patient during that time. It will happen. Now I'm going to press refresh here, and what we'll see is that all of the transitions have occurred. We're now at 100% for the activation of this new virtual paddock. And now the previous virtual paddock is displayed as a dotted line, indicating that it's now turned off. And I didn't have to do anything, right? It just happens automatically as part of the sequence of turning on virtual fences. And the other thing I just want to talk about a little bit is you don't need to turn off virtual fences if you're going from one virtual fence to the next virtual fence. You never need to actually turn off a virtual fence in between. You're just moving from one to the next, right? And in the scenarios that I'm describing, and many of you are doing already anyway, that is the most logical thing to do, because you're going from, again, let's jump over here and highlight that. We're going from one area to an extended area, right? So we're just opening up fresh pasture. And if your operation allows, right, you may be able to, pardon me, you may be able to bring that back fence in immediately, right? So that's the process, going from one active virtual fence to the next virtual fence. No need to turn off virtual fences in between those operations.
I was going to say, Zippo, one of the questions I get from people is how often we can do that, like how many times per day. And we've got customers that are doing quite an intensive rotational grazing program, and they're opening up small amounts of pasture quite regularly. What would you say would be the higher end of the, the capacity of the system, I guess, to do that?
Yeah, and so the highest that we've seen in terms of activating virtual paddocks in a sequence like this is maybe up to 4 times a day. And now that's really starting to get quite busy. That's, every 6 hours you're turning on a new virtual paddock. That's perfectly okay. The system, as I said, right, there is a transition time between virtual paddocks. And that can take anywhere between half an hour to an hour, right, for all of the neckbands to have received the new virtual fence geometry. So take that into account. But really, I've created a demonstration here with fairly sizable steps in your pasture, right? If you really want to intensify your grazing, you could be breaking this down into much smaller allocations. And we've certainly got some customers doing that, right? And then they are releasing those smaller allocations much more frequently, like every 4 hours or even every 2 hours, right? And there's a benefit in really breaking it down, because you can quite confidently then shift an entire cell along in much smaller little increments of movement, because there's really very little chance that you will leave an animal behind when really the whole virtual paddock is just traversing through your physical paddock.
Hey, Zippo, we've got a question, Elizabeth Owens. So we're going to take our first question. Morning, Elizabeth, and welcome.
So all of the cows' collars have to update for that virtual fence, that new paddock, to activate completely?
Yes.
I guess I asked because I definitely had collars that, 3 or 4 collars just not activating for 2 days.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's really been a little bit of a hiccup with actually moving the cows to a new paddock. They get kind of stuck somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Now, look, really good question. And yes, it does happen, right? We do have a product failure rate of around 2% still at the moment. So from time to time, we have neckbands that stop communicating for whatever reason, right? It's a pretty harsh environment out there. We're doing our best to get on top of those failures, but they do occur, right? So, and yes, you're absolutely right. And thank you for this question, because it does, again, cause more confusion. So let's take the example of we had Crown 01 virtual paddock active. Now, let's assume that one of these neckbands stopped communicating, right? So we no longer have the ability to send any information to it, nor do we have the ability to receive any information from that neckband. So when we make a transition to the next virtual paddock, the system will try and send the instructions to this neckband that's no longer operational. Of course, it won't make it through because, well, for whatever reason, that neckband's given up the ghost. But every other neckband, right, will receive the instructions. All the neckbands that are working, they have received the instructions. So it's a single outlier that is, to some extent, holding up the system, if you like. So this neckband was reporting the Crown 01 virtual fence the last time that we heard from it, right? So in every message back to the platform, the neckband tells us, hey, I'm enforcing Crown 01. That is my virtual paddock that I've got right now. That's the virtual paddock I'm enforcing. So the last message that we've received says this virtual paddock was active. So in this situation, we can't display it as inactive because one neckband is supposedly still on it, but really, right, it's just the fact that we can't get messages to and fro. The best thing to do in a situation where neckband stopped communicating is to unfit the neckband from the animal, right? And maybe I'll go through that right now just so that we can see how that works. We digress a little bit, but I'll do it anyway.
And once we've done that, Zippo, we've got a couple of questions once you've gone through that process for us. Perfect.
Okay. All right, let's do that. So this neckband here stopped communicating for whatever reason, right? I'm going to find it in the list. I've clicked on it here on the map. I'm going to sort by these arrows here, bring it up to the top. There it is. Ignore the fact that it's just communicated 8 minutes ago. We'll leave that alone. So now I'm going to edit this animal because I want to remove the neckband from animal 152. So edit and edit single animal. And in here now, I get this menu here, this on the side menu. I've got the neckband that is fitted to this animal. So I click on this and now I have the unfit option, right? So I'm going to unfit that neckband and I'm going to save it. And now you can see the neckband has gone from a blue dot to a green triangle, indicating that it's an unfitted neckband. And as soon as we do that on the platform, what that indicates to us is, okay, there's no longer an animal involved where maybe there's just a longer communication delay. That unfitted neckband can't have an active virtual fence associated with it. So then we release the virtual paddock that was previously shown as being active, right? So that is the best way to rectify those issues.
Excellent. Thanks, Zippo. Anne, you've got a question. Welcome, Anne. Thanks for joining us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes,
can hear
we
you
can.
loud and clear.
So if you have zero communication with your collar, and you cannot edit it like that from a blue to a green triangle because there's zero communication, will that collar still shock the cow if it tries to go with the herd through that virtual fence? Or if there's zero communication with that collar, do you lose any ability for that collar to electrocute the animal?
Yeah, that's correct. So after a period of, let's say, again, we'll take the example where neckband has for whatever reason is failing to be able to connect to the network and send messages and receive messages, right? After a period of 24 hours, let's say the rest of the neckband is functional, right? So it's still doing something, but it just can't communicate. After 24 hours, the neckband on its own will make the decision that, okay, I can't communicate with the platform. I haven't heard any messages from the platform. I'm going to deactivate my virtual fences, right? So no further stimulus will be applied from that neckband. It will no longer deliver any audio tones and pulses, and the animal is free to move along with the rest of the herd. And actually, just to answer another one of your questions, even if the neckband has stopped communicating, we still have the ability to unfit that neckband like I just showed you on the platform. We can still do that, right? Because that's a web application operation. It doesn't really have anything to do with the neckband, and we don't need communication back and forth from the neckband to be able to unfit it on the platform here.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, Zippo. The animals, I tell people they don't have to be online 24 hours a day because they will wander into, if you've got a farm that's got average connectivity, or you've got some really good areas, and then your animals are wandering into those parts of the paddock where there's, a gully or some trees or an area where they might drop out of service for a period of time. That's why that 24-hour timer will then start and then reactivate that or reset that timer once those animals come back into service or come back into watering points. Obviously, we want as much service as we can for those neckbands to work as efficiently as they can, but essentially the system is designed to be able to handle those sometimes poorer communication areas across your farm, which is, I guess, practical and realistic. Thanks, Zippo, and thanks, well, I'm not sure your name's Anne, but we've got you down as Anne. Jonathan's got a question. Welcome, Jonathan. Just remember to take yourself off mute. Yep, got you.
Okay, so my question, there's two parts to it. The first one is, what is the status of the collar of the neckband to the beast when it's unfit? And my other question that relates to it is, if there's one that's not responding, is there a facility to give you feedback, bring up a flag, send you a message to say you've got one that's not responding?
Okay, let me try and answer that in the two sections. So first of all, I think the first question was around what do unfitted neckbands, what state are they in, what are they doing, right? So when we have unfitted neckbands, and now, right, because I've taken this one off, it's showing up as a green triangle. And actually on the demo property here, I think there are a few others. Look, let's leave that aside. I think there were some other ones showing up somewhere else. So unfitted neckbands, you essentially can see their location as a green triangle, but that's it. You cannot turn a virtual fence on an unfitted neckband. So the neckband has to go through what we call that neckband association process, where we say, okay, this neckband has been put on this animal. So if you like to have that traceability of knowing exactly, okay, neckband number such and such has gone on to an animal with a visual tag of whatever, then you can make that association, of course. And once it's become an animal, or once it's on an animal, then it will show up as a round icon, and then that is when you can turn on virtual fences on it.
Zippo, just jump in there again if that's okay. So we've got a question from John Marriott, asked a few minutes ago, is there a role for mobile watering points? And I guess it's probably a good opportunity just to explain why we have the watering points. Apart from, when we map our property, we can see all our watering points and make sure that we're creating virtual fences around those watering points. But maybe we just touch on the warning feature when we're setting up a virtual paddock. If there's no warning, if there's no watering point, and that alerts obviously the user that hey, you're setting up a virtual paddock without watering. And also the other thing I was going to say, Zippo, is with regards to seeing all your infrastructure or your paddocks, the little menu up there in the top left, do we want to just go through that quickly and show what we can and can't hide on the system?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Geez. Okay. There was a few things in there. Maybe do we start with the watering points first, and then maybe I'll jump back over here into the layers. But so firstly, John, regarding mobile watering points, absolutely right. If you really want to try and intensify your grazing and really have recreate that natural process of animals wandering through grassland in a tight bunch, right, which is like the holy grail, then a mobile watering point, like a big tanker, would be fantastic, right? And there are challenges associated with that, of course, right? Animals drink a lot of water, so if you've got a big mob, you need a bloody big tanker. But yeah, that'd be lovely. I would love to see any of you guys actually doing that, and it's certainly possible with the platform as well.
Zippo, can I just interrupt? I'm not referring to something on wheels. I'm referring to a large pipeline that would be along the northern boundary of that, say, that has plug-in areas for a plastic trough that you just move periodically. That's what I'm not talking about a mobile system in that sense. Okay.
Okay, understood. And yes, we already have people doing exactly that. In New Zealand, they call it techno grazing, right? Where we have pipelines running through the paddock and have these mini watering troughs along the way where cows can just push down on a valve and service themselves, get the water. And that, of course, allows you to, once again, just continually move animals along, including the back fence, right? And they're seeing some incredible improvements in efficiency, right? The grass rebounds so much quicker, as we all understand with rotational grazing, right? And you can start, you can rotate animals through a physical paddock time and time again, right? So yeah, it works really well. All right, and then yes, the final point, and I'll try and make that quick, is the reason why we do have these watering points marked on our map is that if you try and turn on a virtual paddock that and we don't know, we haven't indicated that there's a watering point inside of it, like let's say I'll just create one here. Like if I go and turn on this virtual paddock, and in fact, let's do that right now. Here's my Angus mob. I'm going to turn on the virtual paddock now. Let's find the one that I've just created, which is at the bottom of the list. There it is. Turn on. So now I'm getting some warnings, right? The first warning is some animals are located outside of the virtual paddock, right? And that's a prompt for you to go, hang on, have I turned on the right virtual paddock? Am I doing something that is really the animals can't do? And in this case, I would very much be doing something that the animals can't do, right? That have to cross over a physical fence boundary and go into this virtual paddock, which is at the moment, there it is. So, right, that's a prompt. Don't do this, in real life, that is. And the other one is, hey, this watering point, or sorry, this virtual paddock has no watering point. And again, that's just a warning to prompt you and say, make sure that whatever virtual fence you're turning on, there's actually a water source in there. Now, if you haven't marked the water source, but you know it's there, you can proceed, right? Are you sure you want to proceed? Yes, I do want to proceed and I want to turn it on. And then the animals now, will be asked to go into this virtual paddock. So these are warnings. It's for you to take note and make sure and think about what you're doing. But the system does allow you to go on and actually move animals, right? Okay, now I really want to move on to get to the scheduling feature. But to do so, I'm going to, rather than use one of my existing setups, I'm going to go a little bit wider. And for some of you, this may be functionality that you already understand, but it may show you a few little tips and tricks on how to do things. So what I'm going to show you is how to set up a rotation in a paddock here. I've already pre-drawn a whole bunch of watering points, right? Just like we are talking about. If you had a pipeline that has a bunch of troughs, fantastic. Now that allows you to really circulate your animals around in this physical paddock a lot easier. So I'm going to create a series of virtual paddocks, and then let's put them into a schedule so they automatically get turned on according to your grazing plan to move the animals and rotate them around. So I'm in the virtual paddock menu and I'm going to create a new virtual paddock. And what I'm going to do is segment off this section here. And I'm going to follow some of the physical fence boundaries and I'm going to cross over some of the others. So here we go. And we are in this physical paddock is called the Roo paddock. So I'm going to call this Roo 01. Now, there were some questions in the previous webinar around the area that we've just allocated here. Note that there are two areas shown down the bottom. There's the total area. That's the total area of my pink outlined polygon. And then there's the grazing area. Now, the grazing area, the platform has worked out that the largest segment is in this area here. So it's taken the intersection of the physical fences and the virtual fences, right? So I've got 100 hectares being allocated to the animals in this area here. So that's just a little bit of an aside on area calculations. So I'm going to save that. So there's my virtual paddock. The other thing to note here, I've gone perpendicular across this laneway, and I'm going to just make the assumption that maybe we've had the animals up in the yards here and we're going to bring them down this laneway, and we can already have this virtual fence active even when the animals are in the yards over here. We can turn this on. We can bring them down the laneway. They can cross over this virtual fence boundary and move into the paddock without any problem. And then they can be released into this area here. And these virtual fence boundaries will already be active and containing those animals. Now, the reason why I've put the fence line perpendicular across their path is to make sure that animals cross over it briskly. What we have seen, if you do have a virtual fence line that is alongside maybe the path that they're walking along, then some neckbands may already register that they're within the virtual paddock, and they will give some audio tones and confuse the animals. So keep it really simple for animals to cross into the virtual paddock. All right. Next topic. So I've created one paddock. I want to now extend the grazing out into the next allocation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the paddock that I've already drawn and use the copy feature, right? Again, there were some questions in the previous webinar around, it's a little bit cumbersome to draw the virtual paddocks. The copy feature simplifies that a lot, especially if you're extending your grazing area like I'm about to do. So I've selected the existing virtual paddock and I'm going to press copy. And it starts me off with the one that I've just created, right? So now I'm going to extend out and use more nodes. Did you notice that? I'm just clicking anywhere on the virtual fence line, right? And I'm dragging some new fence posts out into an area to open up that grazing area, right? And If I've created too many and I actually didn't want to create those, and it's very easy to get rid of them by just clicking on them again, right? So you can see there they go. I've extended out the grazing area around the next watering point, and I'm going to call this Ru 02 in the sequence, and I'm going to save that. So now we've got the next virtual paddock, and now I can very quickly go and continue on this same sort of pattern here, right, where I just extend out the grazing area. You'll notice that I'm leaving some of the nodes from the previous virtual paddock in this virtual paddock, and I've got the luxury of doing that because these shapes are fairly simple, so I've got plenty of fence posts available. As you can see, for the inclusion zone, the IZ, I still have 20 more fence posts that I could be dropping to make an even more elaborate boundary, but in this case, right, it's nice and simple. So I'm leaving all of the previous fence posts in place, and you'll see in a moment why I'm doing that. So this is Ru 03, and I'm have a leading 0 there, so I can go all the way up to 99 paddocks, right? And they'll still go nicely into a sequence. So save that. Now, after Ru 03, what I might start doing is actually do some back fencing, and right, this is where these little tips and tricks come in. So because I've left the other fence posts in place, I can just pull up the previous ones, right? So I'm going to bring the back fence in now and pull it up. So I'm going to just click on these posts here, pull them up. So easy. God, fencing is so easy these days. Right, so now the back fence is over to here, and this is Ru 05. Save. So now we've got a back fence in there as well, and again, now I can go from Ru 05. I'll copy that, and again, right, watch me. I'm grabbing any segment of the fence line here, and I'm dragging it out to create a new space, right? So I'm leaving the existing nodes in place and just creating some new ones. Now we've got this nice little right angle to bring animals across here. This is Ru 06, and I'm deliberately going quite fast here because we want to get through a few more of your questions. So you can watch this again in the replay when we load this up on in our help center.
Yeah,
so
sounds good, Zippo. Yeah, so on that note, we might take a couple of questions, Zippo, if that's all right. Yep. We've got Jonathan. I think he had his hand up just before. Jonathan, have you got a question for Zippo?
I do. Very common to have shade trees in a large paddock. How can we make those shade trees available in various cells? Is the mapping mutually exclusive to an area, or can you have overlap areas?
Okay, well, look, probably the best explanation I can give there is that if you have those shade areas in your paddock, simply draw your virtual fence boundaries around them, right? So let me see if I can just demonstrate that with an example. I'll go back to maybe Ru 02, and I'm going to edit this paddock, and I'm just going to assume for a moment that there's a shaded area over here. Well, what I would suggest is that you simply do something like this, right? Where you go, okay, I have some treed areas, and I want them to have access to those trees in this area here, if that's where they are. You know, this map doesn't show many trees, but let's assume that's the case. So just bring your virtual fence line around that area, right, to give them access to it. Does that answer your question?
So then when you go to the next virtual fence arrangement,
yep,
you want to include that cell, so you're going in clockwise direction around that paddock?
Yep.
So you can map it in, and it doesn't matter that it's being covered by another fence.
No, that's right. Again, right, if I had drawn this in right at the beginning, and if I then take a copy of it like I've done now, and then I extend my grazing area, like, then of course you still have that accessible to the animals as well. Of course, once you start doing back fencing and you've shut off this area, well, then of course, then they don't have access to it anymore, but maybe you've included other areas with shade. So that's the beauty of the virtual fencing platform. You can make it as complex and as weird and wonderful as you like, right? Given the limitations of the number of fence posts that you can put up. But you can, really encircle any area or exclude some areas as well. If you've got areas with sensitive soil or sensitive riparian zones or whatever you like, you just go around them, right? And don't let animals go into it. And we see some people using that to some amazing success. So yeah, get creative with your virtual paddocks.
Thank you.
Question on that while we're talking about exclusion zones, Zippo, how many exclusion zones can we have per virtual paddock? Is it just the one or multiple?
Yeah, look, it is just the one. And sorry, again, a slight segue from our scheduling, which, but I'll just jump onto that question. Because again, yes, it has been something that's been asked a few times. At this stage, we can only have a single exclusion zone in a virtual paddock. So I'm going to make an example here where I've got a virtual paddock. I'm going to define my inclusion zone, right? So this is where the animals can go. And now on the left-hand side here, I'm going to go and define my exclusion zone within this inclusion zone. So I'm going to press on exclusion zone, and I'm going to mark out this area here. And I don't know what's going on there. It's just a bit of a dark area, maybe a bit more bushy than others. There we go. So now I've drawn a single exclusion zone within that inclusion zone, and now I can press save, right? So there were some questions around drawing these kind of paddocks. There are a few rules around how tight you can make this corridor here, and there are some changes that will come shortly around how close you can have the two boundaries together, but that's the principle of operation. Again, questions from other times, we are looking to introduce permanent exclusion zones, right, where instead of defining the inclusion zone once, you might be able to define a whole bunch of shapes around sensitive areas or areas that you just don't want animals to go into. You define them once, and then the system will, if you've got a virtual paddock that overlaps a permanent exclusion zone, then the system will work out itself what virtual fence geometry needs to be sent to the neck band to contain animals in that area, right? So that's a feature that's coming. But it needs quite a bit of work from our development team. All right, let's try and jump back onto. I'm just going to delete that to not to get it out of our. So it's not a distraction. So this is a very simplified scenario, and you can see how I can keep going around in this physical paddock to continue allocating fresh pasture. I understand this is in very large jumps, right? And so I very much encourage you to do it in much smaller segments, right? Because your pasture utilization will be improved, to the next level, right? If you really start intensifying your grazing and pasture allocations, they'll not only eat all the beautiful juicy leaves, they'll eat some of the stem as well. And then you release the next part, right, to really get the best out of your pastures. So let's put these into a schedule now so you don't have to turn them on every day, right? So the way to do that is we go up to the schedules menu, which is at the very top here, and we're going to put our Angus cow mob into a schedule to rotate around here. So I'm going to say, yes, I want to do, oh, well, actually, no, what I need to do is I'm going to start adding a schedule. At the moment, we have no schedules, so none of them are shown. The only reason that this selector is here is if you already have a whole bunch of different schedules for different mobs, then you can filter out to see only the schedules for your Angus cows. But at the moment, there are no schedules, so we have to create one first. So I'm going to go add. And now it's asking me, okay, which mob do you want to schedule? So I'm going to say I want to schedule my Angus cows. And then it says, which virtual paddock do you want to put in the schedule? So again, I get the virtual paddock selection menu, and I'm going to go down to the Roo paddock here, and I'm going to say I want this one here. And now it says, okay, well, how long do you want to contain animals in this virtual paddock for? And I want to do that for 1 day, right? So I'm going to put in 1 here. And then by default now the add another schedule move is enabled, right? So I'm going to be able to put the next one in the schedule as well. So that's good. I'm just going to confirm that my start date is correct as well. So it's going to start, my time at the moment is 11, not quite 11:30, it's 11:18. The system has automatically said, okay, well, the earliest I'm going to turn that on for you is in an hour's time. And that just allows for that message to be able to be sent to the neck bands. So it's saying, yep, at 12:30 this afternoon, this virtual paddock will turn on. And because we've said I want it on for 1 day, it's saying that it'll end on the 13th of March, right? So I'm going to save that. I'm going to say, yep, that's good. And now it immediately adds that that first move to this virtual paddock into my schedule, and it goes on to allow me to schedule the next one, right? So I just need to select the next virtual paddock in the sequence. And immediately it's now reduced the number of options that I have available. And that's because the system requires 100% overlap of the virtual paddock that they're in to the next virtual paddock. And RU02, which you can see is that extended grazing area, I'll just zoom in a little bit, conforms to that rule. So I can extend their grazing area out now to the next virtual paddock. Again, I want to have this virtual paddock now turned on for another day, right? So there it is, 1 day. I can change that to a shorter duration, to a number of hours if I want, right? So far, all pretty straightforward. I go save, and it just keeps going, right? I can now select the next virtual paddock. Again, that's going to be on for 1 day, save. Next one, right? Now I come to where it says, okay, I don't have any other ability to add a virtual paddock into this schedule. And the reason for that is that the mode that the neck bands are in right now, the default mode, right, will not apply stimulus to any animals that are outside of a virtual paddock. So the scheduling feature has some rules attached to say that, okay, well, if you're in the standard mode, you can't dump a whole lot of animals into an exclusion zone, right? And this is where we need to turn on another feature, which is the return to paddock feature, right? It's a more advanced mode where the neck band will give some stimulus to animals that are in the exclusion zone. And the way that works is, and I'll try and explain it, I'm going to actually jump out of this part for a moment. I'll untick that and I'll press cancel. So now we have a schedule here for the 3 paddocks, right? Just to close off on this part, that allows us to transition 1, 2, 3 into this area here. But just to discuss the return to paddock feature, if animals are left behind, I'll go and do that via having some virtual paddock turn on. Let's go to this one here. Right, let's say we wanted to transition to this next virtual paddock where we're starting to shut off some of the previous areas. If we have animals that remain in this area here and we've turned on this virtual paddock, then in the current situation, there will be no stimulus will be applied to those animals. They will be free to continue roaming here, and it'd be of their own accord to enter into this virtual paddock here. With the return to paddock feature enabled for your property, then any animal left outside, if it tries to move further away, so in this case in the southerly direction, so it's moving away from this virtual fence line, if it moves away from it, then the neck band will apply an audio tone to say, hey, you're going in the wrong direction, right? And if it continues going in the wrong direction, it will get the pulse as well. But if the animal is moving towards the virtual paddock, it's moving in the right direction, then nothing happens, right? It's perfectly okay for that animal to move into the virtual paddock. So over a period of time, just through the natural movement of the animal with very little stress applied at all, the animal will find itself in the inclusion zone, right? So for that to, with that feature enabled, with the return to paddock feature enabled, then we are allowed to put back fencing virtual paddocks into our schedules, right? So in fact, Catherine, could I ask you to enable the return to paddock feature in admin portal for the demo property? Because then maybe we'll be able to demonstrate that live.
Okay.
Zippo,
Yeah.
just while Catherine's doing that, and to give you a breather and have a glass of water, mate, you're going well. We just had a question in the chat, Zippo, about legislation, and I'm not across other parts or other regions that we operate in, but I can speak for Australia. So currently in Australia, eShepherd virtual fencing is legal and available commercially in Queensland, Northern Territory, WA and Tasmania. I do get plenty of questions about New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia, all those 3 states. Unfortunately, at this present moment, we cannot sell virtual fencing. We cannot sell neck bands into anyone in those areas. However, we are working with government to, I guess, provide all the information required to try and get that legislation changed. There has been some discussion within the media about New South Wales, which is looking promising, but at this stage, there's no guarantees that legislation will be passed, and if passed, we're not sure when. So by all means, keep talking to us, about virtual fencing, and I guess when and if legislation is passed in those non-eligible states, we'll be making, I guess, plenty of noise and communicating with existing customers or customers emerging that have registered on our web page to show interest in virtual fencing. How are we going there? We've got the return to paddock. So Zippo, return to paddock isn't enabled for everybody?
No, it is a more advanced feature, right? So we only enable it once you've become very proficient with the platform, and more importantly, once your animals have become used to the idea of virtual fencing, right? So whilst we see some extremely short durations of training with animals, right, that pick it up so quickly that when I hear that audio tone, I've got to move back to avoid getting the pulse altogether. Right, that training can occur in a day or sometimes even less. But right, don't let that fool you. Like, you can see your animals responding so well, and you might be excited about moving on too quickly. I always say give them at least a week, right? For new animals that have only just started their adventure with virtual fencing, give them at least a week of becoming very comfortable with this concept, right? Because some animals interact less than others, and we want to give those animals that are more the followers rather than the leaders a chance to really understand it as well. So for that reason, this a more advanced feature, the return to paddock feature, is disabled by default for all properties, until we have a conversation with you to say, okay, are you ready to start doing more intensive and more advanced grazing? Then we can enable that feature for you, and you can start putting some of these virtual paddocks into rotations and include back fencing.
Great, Zippo. Yeah, so we've got a few minutes left here. I think Catherine's just doing her handiwork in the background, but a couple of questions here which we can probably roll into one, Zippo, and that's around the accuracy of the neck bands in terms of how accurately they respond to our drawn lines, and also can we create laneways? And I guess one of the questions that I get asked as well, how wide can those laneways be?
Yeah, okay, great. So let's discuss the accuracy. These neck bands, right? It's a battery-powered device. It has a GPS on board. The GPS is the most power-hungry device that is on board the neck band, so we try and use it sparingly. It's not like the precision agriculture that you get on your big John Deere tractor where power is not a problem, right? For those systems have corrected GPS with some additional base stations, and they can achieve centimetre accuracy. We can't do that with the neckband because we don't have unlimited power. So our accuracy is around about 1 to 1.5 meters, right? So it's maybe, what's that, 4 feet. And what we typically, and now, an important point, right? The movement or the inaccuracy may occur over a period of time. And the reason for that is that the GPS satellite constellations, they move across the sky. And as that movement happens, some satellite signals are lost and other ones come online. And that can cause a little bit of inaccuracy on the ground, right? But at any one moment in time for a group of animals that are interacting with the virtual fence line, the accuracy, they will receive audio tones and pulses at pretty much the same position, you know, maybe plus or minus 0.5 meter even, right? So very accurate. Now, in terms of laneways, I caution people against creating very tight laneways. So, you know, I would say 10 meters is a tight laneway. I wouldn't want to go much narrower than 10 meters. So that's probably what I'd say about laneways.
And buffering around water points, Zippo. And another question that I get constantly, can we cut a dam in half so animals can only access one side of the dam? And if we're setting up a virtual paddock around a water trough, how far do we put the virtual fence around the back side of the watering trough?
Yeah, good. Another great question. And I think I did discuss this in the last webinar as well. I would always encourage you to give a nice big wide berth around any watering point. We never want animals coming into water and getting audio tones and pulses, right? Because that will then frighten them from coming to your water source, and that will just decrease your performance of the system altogether, right? If your animals are not drinking, they're not feeding enough either. So make sure you give not as big a area around the watering point as you can afford. In many instances, right, watering points are somewhere near the corner of your paddocks or on a fence line. So just go well outside of that area to make sure that as animals come in, there's no chance they're going to get any stimulus.
Yep, Zippo. So we're just about out of time, and what Zippo and I did discuss, we will just end the formal part of the webinar now. So if anybody's got to go, obviously you're free to go whenever you like, but Zippo and I and Catherine are happy to stay on for another, you know, up to half an hour or so. If anyone's got any additional questions or want to go through anything else specific, I'm happy to do that. And also all this information that Zippo's running through is available in the bottom right-hand corner of the web application. Down there, you'll see a little circle with a question mark in it with help written under it. So all the YouTube videos and all the training material is available for anybody to use at any time they want to upskill themselves within the web app. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for everybody for joining us today. Thanks to Zippo for a very comprehensive overview of the features within rotational grazing. And the recording will be available via a link, and we'll put some question and answers below that recording link. So we'll send that to everyone who's registered today. And of course, if you want more information or you want to have a one-on-one discussion about eShepherd and you're thinking about starting that journey, we've got local BDMs, business development managers in all regions across Australia, New Zealand and North America. Just jump on the relevant website to that country, and our contact details, mobile and email, are available for anyone to have that discussion. We've got plenty of information to share. And the last thing I want to say, keep an eye out for the next webinar. I hope you've really enjoyed it. We've enjoyed talking to you all and taking your questions. And there was a question about not being able to access the chat. May I suggest troubleshooting that one, just downloading Teams to your mobile device, iPad or laptop. It might make for a slightly better user experience next time. So like I said, we will continue on to take any questions, but I understand people are busy and they've got to go. So thank you again, guys. And yeah, really looking forward to seeing you on the next one. Okay, Zippo.
All right. Well, we might just run through, well, Mark, how much longer should we go for? Because, you know, these, whilst I love doing these webinars, we could probably stay here for another whole hour, and I don't really want to keep lots of people again on the line for that.
Sure. Have you got a couple of one or two extra features that Catherine was activating, the return to paddock or the schedule?
Yeah, I think
we can probably run through that for another, say, 10 minutes, Zippo.
Yep, sure. I'll try and do it nice and briskly so that we can move on. So we've enabled the return to paddock feature now, and if I go to the animals menu, I can see a new icon has been introduced, and it shows that for these animals now, the returning feature is on, right? So you'll see this green icon at the front when it's enabled for your property. Before this was enabled, you don't have this column there at all, so you won't know that it's enabled. Okay, so now that we've got that enabled, we can actually create a new schedule, and I'm just going to take this one off and start again to show how we can now transition through a whole bunch of paddocks here, right? So again, I'm in the scheduling feature. I'm going to add a schedule. I'm going to do it for our Angus mobs. I'm going to select the virtual paddock. Now, in this instance, in the background, I actually already enabled the first virtual paddock in our sequence. So now I can say, okay, well, I can move straight to the next virtual paddock, right? So I'm going from this active one to the next one. And again, I want to enable that for 1 day. And yes, I do want to add another scheduled move immediately afterwards. I'm going to press save. And now I can quickly go through to the next one, save that. Again, I'm leaving the settings on by default for 1 day for every one of these virtual paddocks that I'm enabling. And now you can see because the return to paddock feature is enabled, I can select the paddock that none of the animals are in, and there's no longer 100% overlap with the previous virtual paddock. So Roo05 becomes available. I can save that, and then I can even put in Roo06, which is the last one that I've drawn so far. So that would allow me to now leave the system to it, and it will move those animals day after day through this rotation. And of course, I hope you get the idea on how I can continue extending this until the animals have rotated all the way around this physical paddock and have grazed it out. Any questions on that?
I'm not sure if there's specific questions to what you've just run through, Zippo, but I do have about 3 or 4 questions that we could probably wrap up with in the chat, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Adrian's asked, is there an easy way to measure in the app?
Yeah, okay. Great question, and it's something that I have also wanted to be able to do a number of times. I found a little workaround, right, by using our virtual paddock creator, because that has a little measuring tool on there, right? So if I want to know, okay, gee, I want to actually allocate a specific amount of additional feed to my animals, I tend to go in here in the virtual paddock menu and just start drawing a new virtual paddock. So first of all, I see I've selected the line, and maybe I want to know, I want to go a certain distance out from that line. Well, there I get my measuring tool, and I can see that I'm at like 400 meters here, right? So this property is rather large, so the units are already in kilometers. I have to zoom right in if I want to be in meters, right? So but that's how I can use the use the virtual paddock creation tool to gauge how far I might want to move. Now, the other suggestion I've got is if you really want to be accurate around how much pasture you're allocating to your animals in the next virtual paddock that you want to extend your grazing area out to, then you can simply draw the shape of the next feed allocation, and you can look at your total area down here, right, to say, okay, well, this is 20 hectares that I would be allocating to them if I extend my area out to that boundary, right? So that's a nice little way to know exactly how much I'm allocating. Of course, you can play with this, with the size of this shape, right, to again, get exactly the right allocation that you want down here. And let's say if it is something like, I don't know, 15 hectares, let's move it up a tiny bit more. So you can see it's a little bit fiddly. You might just need to make a few adjustments, but now I've got 15 hectares. Maybe that's what I want to allocate. So I'm going to save this temporary little virtual paddock, right, just as a marking tool. And then what I can do is take a copy of my active virtual paddock, right? So I can copy that and extend the grazing area, and it will now snap nicely to the lines that I've already drawn, right? So really easy way to work out how much of an allocation do I want, and then extend your virtual paddock out to that new allocation.
Another question, Zippo, what is the maximum number of animals I can control with this system? Well, I probably should have followed up with a question, how many animals have you got?
Yeah, that's right. Look, there are, we haven't run into the limitation really. There are for our cellular neck bands where communication happens directly with the cell tower. It goes into the many thousands, right? Before we overwhelm a cell tower with connections. So that's not really a practical limitation. With the LoRa system, where we have a base station located on your property, really there are not that many restrictions either. But what does happen if you've got, once you're above somewhere around 1,400 animals, then you may need to slow down your communication cadence, right? So instead of the neckband checking in every 10 minutes, you may have to extend that communication period out to every 15 minutes to accommodate more neckbands. So that way we can scale on other properties with larger number of neckbands.
Excellent, Zippo. Thank you. Another question, is the return, and excuse me, Zippo, we may have covered this, is the return to paddock feature the same as for getting animals that have escaped the virtual paddock back into the virtual paddock? Yes. Yes,
it is. It is the same feature. At times we wanted to call that feature a shepherding feature, but there were some concerns around moving animals with virtual fences. We tried to explain that actually we are not actively moving the animal. All that happens is that when an animal tries to walk in one direction that is it's in the wrong direction, it's not in the direction that we wanted to go in, that's when it will get stimulus, but it can avoid any audio tones or pulses completely by walking in the other direction, right? So the animal is still very much free to roam around. It's just not allowed to go in one direction. So really not a concern from an animal welfare perspective, but it is, yes, to answer the question, it is the same feature that if an animal does, for whatever reason, escape out of an active virtual fence boundary, after a little while where we've let the animal go, the return to paddock feature will kick in. And then anytime again it tries to move further away from the virtual paddock that it's supposed to be in, it will get the audio tones and then pulses. So that encourages that animal to rejoin with the group and come back inside the virtual fence.
And just to support that, I guess, Zippo, we don't have a lot of people, certainly with my customers, we don't have a lot of people using that feature because we find once the training period is over, the animals are on the farm, they're familiar with the system, they understand an audio cue, maybe they've been pulsed a couple of times. They, again, respond really well and we don't find the need. So it's an additional feature that's optional and that is turned on by the admin team or the customer success team from Melbourne, if and when we do need that feature. So just something to keep in mind. Keith Rudderham, you've got a question. You've had your hand up for a while, I'm sorry. Yeah, fire away, Keith.
Okay, thank you. I just question, when you have a fence that's active for a paddock, can you actively move those fence boundaries, or do you have to pre-build what your next move and your next move are going to be?
Yeah, great. Thank you for that question. Again, it's one that comes up from time to time. No, you cannot change an active virtual fence boundary, right? And the reason for that is that really the geometry is on each and every single neckband, right? Which makes the system very resilient to delays or pauses in communication, right? Because comms on rural properties, I'm sure I don't need to go into it. You know how challenging it is, right? So getting these messages back and forth from the neckbands at times, right? If an animal is down in a gully or behind some trees, then we maybe are not getting the messages to and fro. And in this case, our system just continues to work properly, right? So, but what that also means is that, yes, you cannot change an active virtual paddock. You can't just go and make changes to it on the fly. You do need to create a copy of it, right? So again, highly recommend using and becoming very comfortable with the copy feature. I've got this virtual paddock here. I want to make some changes. I simply select the active virtual paddock. I copy it, right? I make the changes that I want. I want to tuck in this boundary, or maybe I want to extend some of it. Let's extend it out. Now I've made the change, save that, right? And now I'm going to go from the active virtual fence to the next virtual fence. So again, simply by selecting my mob, I'm going to turn on the new virtual fence that I've just defined and try and find that in the list, which there it is. I didn't rename it to anything. I'm going to turn that one on. And now I'm going to, so it says, oh, some animals are part of a schedule move. Okay, yes, I get a warning because I have put them into a schedule. That's okay. I'm just going to click turn on anyway, just to demonstrate. So I'm overriding now the virtual paddock that was the active one with the new one, right, that I've made some changes to. And again, this is the preferred and highly encouraged method, right? You don't need to turn off your active virtual fence and jump over and then create a new virtual fence and turn that on, because during that transition period, you may have some animals that are no longer contained by a virtual fence, right? Whereas if you're jumping from one active virtual fence to another active virtual fence, then your animals are always contained within your virtual fence boundaries.
Excellent. A couple more questions before we wrap up, guys. I've got Darren. He's had his hand up for a little bit. Yeah, you got a question for Zippo, Darren?
Hello. Yes, I just wanted to ask, when your tag has been, so the collar's been unfitted and it turns green on your map, is the GPS location still reported? So can you actually see where that animal is? Or is it just that was a last known location?
Oh, sorry. So I maybe didn't quite catch the start of your description of the issue. What can you just run that by me again?
So earlier you had a collar that wasn't responding correctly and you unfitted it. I think that was the terminology, and it turns into a little green triangle.
Yes.
Does that GPS location of the animal continue to be reported, or is that its last known position?
Yep. Okay. Well, there's two scenarios that we were trying to work through there. One is where the neckband has, for some reason, can no longer communicate with the platform, right? If that's the case, then no, we won't get any updates to say, hey, I'm now here. So therefore, the green triangle will no longer update its location. And after a period of, what is it now? There's a certain amount of time, there'll actually be a cross through this neckband. It looks a little bit like this, right? To say, hey, we haven't had any comms from that neckband in 24 hours, right? So you'll know that even with the green triangle. But on the flip side, if that unfitted neckband is still communicating, then yes, absolutely, it will update its location and you will see it on the map.
Thanks, Darren. And other Darren, we've got a question from you as well.
Yeah, on making lanes and moving cattle across my farm, we normally make the paddock, or the lane, I should say, probably about 25 yards wide, so about 75 foot wide. And then we just leave the cattle kind of find their way down that lane by themselves. My question is there some way we can put a gate in there? Like, so once they go through a certain point, it actually blocks it so they can't turn around and go back? Because the cattle are grazing normally, you know, to get home, and it always is like I have to watch it to make sure I catch them and everything else, so I shut them off. But
yeah, Catherine, take note of a new feature that we need to introduce. We don't really have that at this point, no. But Yeah, I'd love to dig into that a little bit more with you, Darren, and find out exactly what the kind of situation or the scenario is, and maybe we can do that. If you draw some on your web app, we can have a look at it and maybe discuss it in a bit more detail and see if we can define a feature, a future feature. Sounds great,
Okay.
Dave.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Oh, you're on mute, Mark.
Oh, sorry. Thanks for your question, Darren. Always good to hear what features you guys are looking for, because it helps our development team prioritise what's important to you guys. David Ross, I got a question for Zippo. Welcome.
And you're on mute, David.
Still on mute, David, if you can hear us.
Let's try and unmute David if we can.
Yeah,
oh.
trying to do that.
I can't unmute David either.
While David's trying to unmute himself, we just got another question in the chat here, Zippo. How often is the animal stimulated if it is continuously moving away, like a bull heading to the neighbouring herd?
Oh, I see. So this is with reference to the return to paddock feature.
Paddock feature,
right?
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So again, there are limits to the number of pulses that we will apply to an animal in bringing an animal back into a virtual paddock. So there are definitely limits to it. Now, we can adjust those limits. We can adjust them in discussion with you, right? And it will depend very much on maybe even the breed of animals that you have got, or the specific scenario that you're working with, you know. So, but yep, what we find typically is that we will adjust the settings so that the maximum number of pulses is 9. Now, the reason for that number is it's because pulses always occur in, or I should say, stimulus is typically grouped into groups of 3. So let's just go over again the standard stimulus algorithm. If an animal tries to break through this virtual fence line, and let's say my cursor is the animal and it's gone out into the exclusion zone, then the neckband will send one audio tone followed by a pulse. Animal is still out. Another audio tone. It hasn't responded, so followed by a pulse. And then the final audio tone and pulse pair will be delivered, right, with the animal in the exclusion zone. And after those 3, that's it. We stop beating up on the animal. We go, okay, we haven't contained you, so you're free to go, right? Now, with the return to paddock feature on, there is a break. There's a short duration that we can set as short as 30 seconds or as long as 10 minutes, or, well, actually longer. Where we can say, we're not going to do anything to that animal for a while. We'll just give it a break before we kick in with another set of 3 audios and pulses. If it's moving in the wrong direction only, right? If it's moving in the right direction, nothing happens. Yep, long and short of it is we can adjust the number of pulses that we ever deliver. And typically, we don't need many to contain animals.
Excellent, Zippo. I've got probably one of our final questions now. Catherine's answered it in her terms. How do you find the defective neckband? That's from Jasmine. Thank you, Jasmine. I'm just wondering, is Jasmine meaning when the animals come back to the yards, if there's a defective neckband on an animal and it's not communicating, how do we identify that neckband when it's in a mob of other animals? And obviously we want to bring that animal in and change that neckband out to a replacement neckband. So there's probably 2 parts of the question here. I think Catherine's answered the first part, but maybe the second part, when the animals come back into the yard, how do we identify the animal when they're all boxed together and all showing their GPS location very similarly?
Yeah, look, that becomes challenging. Absolutely, I totally get that. What can help is that we have our unique identifier of each of these neckbands, right? So as I hover over the animals, you can see that it shows the animal number. In this case, it's A163, and the neckband number, which ends in 0794. So what we can do, that neckband number is programmed into an RFID chip that resides inside the neckband. You can use your handheld wand, either a Gallagher wand or a True Test wand or any other wand that you've got. Many of them have a feature where you can program in an item of interest. So you could enter in this neckband number into your wand, and when it scans an RFID tag with that same number, it will give out a tone, right? It'll give you a special alert. So if you're familiar with that feature of your wand, you can use that, and we've used it quite successfully with a whole bunch of neckbands that we've wanted to identify. You simply have your animals come through your yards, maybe even through the race. You can scan the neckband. If it is the one that is of interest to you because it's faulty, then your wand can give you that alert. That's probably the easiest way to find one out of a big group.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Zippo. Thanks, guys. That's probably at the pointy end of where we need to be today. A lot of information to take in. And, yep, Zippo.
David's just had his microphone unmuted a minute ago. Here we go, David. Let's go.
Let's
David.
Do it. How are you, David?
Last one,
Sorry.
we promise.
Hi, guys. How you going?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can you tell me, there's a working group on the electronic bans in Australia. They were trying to get a national law through to cover Victoria, New South Wales, South Australia. Do you know where they're up to and whether they're any close to approving the use in Victoria and the other states?
Yeah, look, Mark spoke about this a little bit earlier. The only other thing I can add to that is that, in South Australia, there was, again, they made an attempt to introduce some changes in legislation to allow virtual fencing. Unfortunately, it got voted down 10 votes to 9. And so it hasn't gone into effect. We hope that, again, they're going to make some adjustments and then be able to make changes to their legislation. But really, other than that, it is a very difficult process. And whilst we are very much just providing information to anyone that is working on this, we provide all of the information and data that they would like from us to demonstrate that this technology doesn't have an adverse impact on animal welfare. That's the best we can do as the manufacturer of this technology. I think what I've said to other people in Australia, if you're in a region where it's not allowed, contact your local member of parliament, right, and tell them that you want this technology for use on your property. We need pressure from the government side to really start influencing people to make these changes in legislation. So that's unfortunately the best we can do at the moment.
Excellent. Thanks, Zippo. Just had a quick question from Byron about missed most of it, wrong time zone, available to watch later. Yes, of course, we'll be sending out the link probably in the next few days, Zippo. We'll just polish things up a little bit and send the link out. And of course, again, thank you everybody for joining us. Zippo's just got the last webinar that we did on the 5th of February, where we were running, I guess, probably a couple of different styles of webinars. But we've just combined them. We'll make one webinar for all existing and emerging users. So to share any of the experiences is really great. And of course, we'll be sending communications out on the next webinar. I'm not sure when that'll be at this stage, possibly another month, which seems to be working at the moment. And of course, if you've got any questions, feedback, always happy to hear from you guys. Anything else to add, Zippo?
Nope, it's a wrap. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate you guys joining. I hope you learned something, and look forward to the next one.
Good stuff. Great work, Zippo. And thank you, Catherine, for taking questions as well.
Okay. Have a great day.
Thanks,
See
guys.
you guys. Bye.